The sword is Saṅkhāra, my enemy's weapon. A distinction must be made between my enemy and the sword. My enemy represented mental intoxications, asava, and defilements, kilesa, and the various desires, tanha, that cause the mind to suffer in myriad ways. The sword symbolized my enemy's thinking, or in other words, Saṅkhāra, mental formations or volitional thought. This Saṅkhāra is employed for the direct purpose of satisfying defilements and desires. Call it the advertiser. It communicates on behalf of all defilements and desires. It would not be wrong to call it a world-class public relations department. When the mind strays in the wrong direction and miccha titi, wrong views and wrong understandings, arise, it is because of these volitional thoughts, Saṅkhāra. When the mind lacks mindful wisdom, sati paññā, when the mind isn't smart and comprehensive in its knowledge, delusion arises. This Saṅkhāra is what creates the advertising image that invites the mind to see things accordingly. Saṅkhāra holds incredible influence. It is an agency that is very effective in satisfying defilements and desires. It is the news reporter that takes various information from defilements and desires and creates storylines to deceive the mind. The stories that Saṅkhāra composes have two main themes. One, ittaramana, or pleasing preoccupations, aramana, and two, anittaramana, or displeasing preoccupations, aramana. For the most part, Saṅkhāra uses pleasing preoccupations to create advertisements. It sources beautiful things to set the stage and describes the properties with exquisiteness, fragrance, and sweetness, so that the mind will become enchanted and swept away without even realizing it. If it were a master of illusion, it would be a world-class professional master of illusion. The mind that lacks wisdom, paññā, and comprehensive understanding of Saṅkhāra's illusions will find itself spellbound and in the dark. The tool Saṅkhāra employs in fooling the mind to see according to its illusions is constructs, sammuti. Volitional thoughts without constructs are non-functioning volitional thoughts. Constructs without volitional thoughts are worthless constructs. It's like having a sword but not knowing how to use it, or knowing how to use a sword but not having one. It's fruitless. Similarly, if you have volitional thoughts but don't have constructs to use in the thinking, or if you have constructs to use in the thinking but don't have volitional thoughts, nothing will happen. If you have a pen but don't have paper on which to write, or if you have paper on which to write but don't have a pen, nothing will get written. Thus, if you have Saṅkhāra but don't have sammuti for Saṅkhāra to use, or if you have sammuti but don't have Saṅkhāra to use the sammuti, nothing happens. Thus, volitional thoughts, Saṅkhāra, and constructs, sammuti, are a pair. They are interrelated. Thus, the sword can be beneficial or detrimental. It is up to the person who uses it. Whatever side the sword falls into, that side will win. If the sword falls into the hands of the police, the criminal will lose. If the sword falls into the hands of the criminal, the police will lose. Likewise, if thoughts are on the side of defilements and desires, wisdom will lose. If thoughts are on the side of mindful wisdom, defilements and desires will lose. Thus, who will lose or who will win is contingent on the sword. And right now, the sword is with the enemy. What method will you employ to dupe the enemy into relinquishing the sword? If you are smart and have a good plan, you will trick the thoughts that have supported volitional thinking, Saṅkhāra, to come back to contemplating with mindful wisdom, sati paññā. It isn't difficult at all. One should understand that if volitional thoughts, Saṅkhāra, don't have thoughts to support them, Saṅkhāra won't be able to produce anything. Wisdom, paññā, is the same way. Without thoughts, using wisdom to contemplate something will be equally fruitless. Therefore, thoughts are an important variable. If the mind frequently directs thoughts to follow the path of defilements and desires, the mind will conform to defilements and desires. Similarly, if the mind frequently thinks in terms of Dhamma, the mind will gradually conform to the path of Dhamma. When thoughts are led to the territory of defilements and desires, they will definitely generate wrong views, miccha titi, within the mind. We must come up with a new policy on thinking. When contemplating on something, it must always correspond to the principles of reality. Train the mind to become accustomed to the universal truth, Satya Dhamma. Since the distant past, the mind has been steeped in wrong views according to volitional thoughts, Saṅkhāra, based in defilements and desires. You must change your attitude, change your way of thinking. When contemplating on something, it must always correspond to the three common characteristics, Thailakkhana, of impermanence, Aniccang, suffering, Dukkhaṃ, and not self, Anatta. The mind must know and see according to the truth frequently, and it will gradually change from wrong views, Micchā Tiṭṭhi, back to right views, Sammā Tiṭṭhi. Because the mind has lost its way from the truth for quite some time now, it's necessary to train the mind and teach the mind to know and see the truth more often, and to find a way to know and see the suffering, dukkha, harmful consequences, dosa, and future perils, paya, inherent in volitional thoughts, Saṅkhāra, of conventional reality, sammuti. The mind must know and see each construct clearly, and train thoughts in wisdom, paññā, to be superior to thoughts in volitional thinking, Saṅkhāra. The mind will decide for itself what is an illusion and what is true. The norm thus far has been for thoughts on the Saṅkhāra side to cover up the truth. That which is pleasing or beautiful is used to mask that which is filthy. That which is fragrant is used to mask that which smells foul. That which is sensually pleasing, kamaguna, is used to mask suffering. That which is impermanent or uncertain masquerades as that which is certain in the mind. That which is a solid, kana, self, atta, is used to mask that which is not self, anatta. That which is not ours proclaims itself to be that which is ours in the mind. That which is not meaningful masquerades as meaningful in the mind. Because the mind has been fooled by Saṅkhāra's masking of the truth for so long, it has subscribed to Saṅkhāra's wrong views, Micchā Tiṭṭhi, the entire time. Now, mindful wisdom, sati paññā, has received accurate information from the Buddha's teachings and will use it to prove the truth. Wherever Saṅkhāra's thoughts obscure the truth, there paññā's thoughts will reveal the truth. Saṅkhāra's thoughts attempt to conceal constructs, sammuti, but paññā's thoughts will find a way to reveal the truth of sammuti. We'll see whether Saṅkhāra's thoughts or paññā's thoughts will have superior strength. If there are few paññā thoughts and many Saṅkhāra thoughts, we will be the loser once more. If there are many paññā thoughts, sammuti can be exposed so that the mind knows and sees all sammuti clearly. This is called yānaṭasana, knowing the truth and seeing the truth of a particular sammuti, or dasanayana, seeing the truth and knowing the truth about various sammuti. Once the mind knows and sees the truth about sammuti, the mind will let go of sammuti on its own. The term moha, or delusion, is the mind that is deluded by sammuti. Avijja, or ignorance, is ignorance of these sammuti. The sword is Saṅkhāra thoughts. With a good method, ubaya, on hand, whenever these thoughts can be tricked into returning to paññā's side, Saṅkhāra will be without a weapon with which to combat paññā. This is paññāvutta. The weapon, avutta, which is wisdom, paññā, is the same way. When the mind has strong wisdom, it is said that wisdom is the mind's eye, or wisdom is the mind's bright light. Whenever the mind is illuminated by wisdom, it's called nati paññā samma āpā. There is no light like wisdom. Within these three realms, there are no constructs, sammuti, that are secret or that can elude or hide from wisdom. Thus, nati loke raho nama. There are no secrets in the world. Wisdom will surveil, search out, and know and see according to the entire truth of reality, that all constructs, sammuti, are subject to the three common characteristics of impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and not self, anatta. Kana is something solid, or a clump of something. Wisdom will destroy kana, scattering it into smaller pieces. There is no self, atta, or sense of self in any way. Since there is no self, there is no us, and there is no them. The term self-belongings is meaningless. Everything is merely a construct, sammuti, to be relied on temporarily. In the coming days, months, or years, it will disintegrate according to its natural properties. This is wisdom that is comprehensive and aligned with the universal truth, Satya Dhamma. In order to correctly interpret a vision, nimitta, it must be your own nimitta. All nimittas, regardless of dream, supinimitta, or visualized image, ukkaha nimitta, that occur to someone will be worthless if that individual doesn't have strong wisdom and comprehensive discernment. Once the nimitta happens, it will merely become a story to tell, or it may be interpreted in a different way that lends no Dhamma benefit. For example, a nimitta of lying in a ditch or a well or immersed in something filthy is interpreted as being down on one's luck or having bad fortune, which then necessitates getting a soothsayer to perform a ceremony to change one's bad luck and improve one's destiny. A nimitta about being chased by a tiger or constricted by a snake is taken as a bad sign or as the possibility of impending danger. Consequently, one suffers anxiety and is constantly wary. A nimitta where one sees a beautiful palace and suspects oneself of living there is interpreted as one's having ample merit and wholesomeness, punya kusala. Consequently, one feels happy and is constantly beaming and smiling. Thus, nimittas can be interpreted many ways. They can be interpreted according to worldly themes, or they can be interpreted according to Dhamma themes. If a nimitta occurs to a practitioner of mental cultivation who possesses strong wisdom, that person will be capable of interpreting the nimitta in correct Dhamma themes. That nimitta will be beneficial and an effective method of solving problems. Nimitta is translated as mark, sign, or symbol. It is a sign that something will be a certain way. Practitioners must only interpret the nimitta in terms of Dhamma, just like I did in the aforementioned example. If you were to follow my example, that would be good. I was greatly energized in my practice during the vasa I spent at Wat Tham Kong Pain. One day, I went and consulted Luang Por Khao about the characteristics of a proper place to practice. What kind of place would be conducive to mental cultivation, bhavana? Luang Por described various places that were favorable to mental cultivation and practice. Each location was one in which he had personally practiced in the past. He told me, each of those places were good, but for this era, the best place to practice mental cultivation is the north. This is because in the north, there aren't as many people to visit you or bother you like in the northeast. They put rice and food into your alms bowl, and that's it. They don't come and pester you to give them lottery numbers like back home. Each day and each night, your practice will have continuity. It won't be broken up or disjointed. Wherever you are walking, sitting, or lying down, you aren't preoccupied with people coming to visit. As for our region, there are so many people who play the government lottery and underground lottery. Wherever you go to practice, there will be people asking for lotto numbers. It's chaotic. They ask for 2 numbers or 3 numbers. They ask to hear your nimittas or dreams. You tell them you didn't dream, and they still force you to have dreamt something. Sometimes they come and observe your movements. You use your hand to scratch your head, or use your hand to grab something, and they decode all of it as lotto numbers. Or if you are speaking on a Dhamma theme, instructing them on how to observe the 5 precepts, Pañcasila, or 8 precepts, Attasila, they interpret it as lotto numbers. Sometimes it's a match with the actual lottery numbers, so rumors spread that this teacher, Ācariya, is accurate at giving hints for the lottery, and then throngs of people swarm you, bringing with them plenty of sweet and savory foods, beverages, and confections. If an Ācariya ever led people to winning money, his temple is packed during the middle or end of the month. Some people observe his words and others his movements, despite the Ācariya himself having no intention of portending any lotto numbers. Some count his footsteps and play that number. Others count the number of bites of food he takes and play that number. So the best thing to do is to go to the north to practice. You'll have time to accelerate your mental cultivation and practice to its fullest. I asked him, Luang Por, in what province do you think it would be best for me to practice? Luang Por said, go practice mental cultivation in the Chiang Rai region. Stick to the rural areas, far from noise and disruptions. Your mind, citta, will readily attain steadfastly focused concentration, samadhi. Your wisdom contemplations will be continuous. There will be solitude for the body and solitude for the citta. You will know and see the universal truth, Satya Dhamma, according to the truth of reality, in a clear and illuminating manner. After hearing what Luang Por Khao had to say, I wanted to head out within the next day or two. I had initially expected Luang Por Khao to tell me to practice in Chiang Mai province, as he had awakened to the ultimate Dhamma in Plau district, Chiang Mai province. But I believed Luang Por's words. He directed me to Chiang Rai province. It was like he had already contemplated it. I would certainly come to know and see the ultimate truth, Satchadhamma, in the Chiang Rai region within the near future. This was another kind of desire, tanha, but it was a desire toward good. It was a desire to break free. This kind of desire, once used beneficially, is a great source of motivation to practice. Thus, tanha yat tarati okang. One crosses the stream of the world by desire. There are two types of desire, worldly desire and Dhamma desire. Worldly desire is desire that follows the stream of the world. Though one feels happy, it is happiness streaked with tears of suffering. There is no pure happiness to be found, but people still greatly delight in and strongly crave for this kind of desire. As for the other type of desire, it is a desire for good. Examples of this kind of desire include a desire to pay tribute to the Buddha and do chanting, a desire to make merit and give charity, a desire to observe the precepts, a desire to practice mental cultivation, bhavana patipati, a desire to eliminate all mental intoxications, asava, from the mind, or a desire to break free and enter the path and fruit of enlightenment, makkaphala nibbāna. These kinds of desires are the desires of the wise and should be encouraged to grow and thrive within each of us. This is because these desires are that which the wise condone and need. In a community of practitioners of mental cultivation, these types of desires are vital and sought after. Thus, practitioners must be able to distinguish between the different kinds of desire. Otherwise, wrong understanding may arise. This is due to hearing many teachers of mental cultivation teach, eliminate all desire, tanha. No desires are to remain within the mind. Nothing is to be acted upon if desire is its cause. This is not understanding desire, tanha. Saying, doing good is not desired, doing bad is not desired, steers one away from realistic attainment of the goal. Normally, the wise laud the cultivation of good and virtue and teach abstinence from evil. Even the enlightened arahant don't have that protocol. This is because desire, tanha, doesn't exist within their minds at all. So even if the arahants do good by whatever means, it is merely an outward action, kiriya. They aren't expecting a specific result from that good action. This is what happens when commoners, putuchana, try to impersonate the enlightened, arahant. It is absolutely wrong. This is because in the beginning stages when one is cultivating virtues and perfections of character, bharami, there must be desire, tanha, leading the way. Only it must be the kind of desire, tanha, that is for good. For example, before our Buddha became enlightened and became the Buddha, he had desire, tanha, that is, the desire to become a Buddha. He cultivated bharami and mentally told himself that he wanted to be a Buddha for 9 incalculable eons, asaṅkhāya. He verbally expressed his desire to be a Buddha for 7 asaṅkhāya. Then he received the prophecy, hayakarana, from Thian-Ngern Buddha, that he would become a Buddha one day in the future. From that moment until now was 4 asaṅkhāya. In total, the Buddha cultivated bharami for as long as 20 asaṅkhāya. The cultivation of his bharami hinged on desire, tanha. So if you teach people to shed desire, tanha, where would they get the motivation to do good in the beginning stages? It is normal for commoners, putuchana, who are still searching, to have desires, such as the desire for a good teacher, the desire to listen to the teacher's Dhamma, or the desire to practice Dhamma until actual results are achieved. Thus, desire is the foundation for continuing to cultivate virtue. It's not that there shouldn't be any desires whatsoever. Rather, there must be a wise method of protecting against evil desires. Be comprehensively wise in the methods of encouraging the desires for good to sprout within the mind, so that there is encouragement to cultivate the merit and wholesomeness, punya kusala, which will support the journey to the path and fruit of enlightenment, makkaphala nibbāna. The same applies to faith or conviction, sattha. Many people don't understand it. This is because, normally, people innately possess beliefs. In which direction those beliefs are applied is contingent on each person's views. If someone possesses strong wisdom and reason, they will not decide to believe in that which is irrational or senseless. They would take what they heard and analyze its rationality before deciding to believe it. Or if they read a book or manual, they will have to use wisdom to discern whether or not that manual's Dhamma is of sound reason and whether or not it can be trusted. Reason must be used as the deciding factor. If there is reason to support it, then believe it. If that information is contrary to reason, then don't believe it. This is called sattha yana sampayutta, which means contemplating with wisdom and finding it reasonable before believing. Only then can it be called the faith of the wise. As for the beliefs of those lacking wisdom, they will believe in things that lack reason. They believe whatever they hear, or they believe the entirety of whatever book they've read. They don't contemplate or consider the reason at all. This is called sattha yana vipayutta, which means those who believe senselessly. If someone says it's right, they also say it's right. If someone says it's wrong, they also say it's wrong. If someone is like this, they will not have a foundation for themselves to rely upon, and will not be able to be a leader to others in any way. The Buddha taught us to have strong conviction chiefly in our own rationality, and to have principles and beliefs of our own that are grounded in reason. Then we will firmly be our own refuge. We must train ourselves to be steadfast, to not be easily swayed by rumors. We must not be like a stick in the sand or a stick in the mud, leaning whichever way the wind blows. Otherwise, we will unwittingly become someone who believes whatever they hear, just like the Kalamas. The Kalamas believed without reason, and without knowing what was wrong or right. Their faith was based on individuals. For instance, if you believe too much in your teacher without considering what is right, regardless of whether your teacher teaches right or wrong, you believe it. The Buddha does not commend this kind of faith. If your teacher happens to be a bona fide holy individual, Arya Bukkala, then it'll benefit you well. But if your teacher isn't a bona fide Arya Bukkala, then it'll be quite risky. It could be wrong, it could be right. If your teacher is a commoner Putushana, but understands the correct methods of practice, then yours will correspondingly contain some correct elements. But if your teacher's methods, ubaya, of practice are incorrect, then yours will correspondingly be incorrect. How can you know if your teacher teaches correctly or incorrectly? The answer is that you should study and understand the Buddha's history. What does the Buddha say is wrong? What does the Buddha say is right? You will instantly know and understand. Thus, you must use the Buddha's history and the Arya Bukkala's histories as a basis. There are volumes of discourses, sutta, on the historical accounts of the Arya Bukkalas. Once you have a clear understanding of the Arya Bukkala's histories, you will immediately be able to compare and contrast those accounts with the present-day teachings of your teacher. You will know which teacher in this era teaches incorrectly or correctly. Otherwise, you will have a tendency to set your beliefs on the wind, completely lacking any stability. You will be unable to be held accountable for your beliefs, as you have trained yourself to be credulous, to vacillate, and to be senseless and irrational. You will never be able to rely on yourself, even up until the day you die. What's worse, these traits will remain with you in your future rebirths.